All right, so for your homework, you're going to read a story called The World Was Silent. This was written by a Holocaust survivor named Elie Wiesel. He is a man. We're actually going to read a novel by him later this year, and this is just going to set the stage for that novel. But before you read the story, I don't know how much you know about the Holocaust, so I want to give just a really vague English teacher's introduction to World War II and the Holocaust. For your first question, I want you to think about this quote by Elie Wiesel. He says, "The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference." And so you may have to use your dictionary to look up some words. You might not know what indifference means, but I'm going to give you an example of indifference. Indifference is when you really don't show emotion either way. It's like you don't care, it's apathy. Here's a kind of a concrete example. Say I'm walking to the bathroom, and as I'm walking down the hall, I see a boy, a senior, and he is just pounding on this little freshman, and the freshman is screaming and crying. Um, Indifference would be me turning my head and pretending like it's none of my business, and I'm just going to walk on by. I pretend like, I'm not seeing it. That's indifference. And so Elie Wiesel says that is worse than hate. And so for your first question, I want you to consider this and see if you agree or disagree. And again, I want you to explain using your wraps in 3 to 5 sentences. So here are just some general terms. We've already talked about indifference. It's the lack of interest or concern about something. We're also going to focus on stereotypes in these next few weeks. And a stereotype, I'm sure you already know, but it's when we judge someone before we know them. It's a prejudiced opinion of a group of people. Penny pincher, I don't know why the R didn't get colored, but a penny pincher was a stereotype of Jews during the World War I and World War II era. It's a slang word for someone who's stingy or just cheap. I like the word prejudice because you can really break it up with its roots. Pre means before, jud means judge. So it is you judge before you know the person. It is typically an unfavorable opinion. Not always. You can have a good sense of someone and it be wrong, but it's usually not a very good thing. Here's a nice social studies term, totalitarian government, this type of government where the government has complete control over freedom, will, and thought. And obviously Hitler would fall into this type of government, the Nazi Germans. Anti-Semitism is just a word that means prejudice against the Jews, discrimination toward, hostility toward the Jews. And then a capo is a noun. We'll see this more in the story, but a capo is actually a Jewish person who is in charge of a work camp, someone who oversees someone like in a concentration camp. And Nazi, I mean, most of you probably know that Nazi is actually a political party, like a Republican or a Democrat. There's all kinds of bad connotations with the word Nazi, obviously, from the Holocaust, but Nazi in itself is just a political party. It was the German Workers' Party. And a ghetto is another word that has a bad or weird connotation in today's terminology, but a ghetto was actually a place where they kind of not roped it off, but it was just a specific area where the Jews had to live during or right before they were sent to the concentration camp. So, I mean, the connotation for ghetto now is like it's a bad part of town, where that is actually derived from, the Jews in World War II Holocaust. So a concentration camp, you know what that is, I'm sure, but it's a death camp, essentially. It's where the Jews were sent to work and really to die. And then the final solution, Hitler said that all the problems in Germany were the Jews were to blame. They were the problem, and so his solution to that problem was to just kill them all. So Hitler's final solution was the term the Nazis used to refer to the plan to annihilate all the Jewish people. This is a theme that we are going to talk about. I know it's just a subject in one word, but dehumanization is a very, very interesting concept. It's really to deprive of human qualities, such as being an individual, having compassion, or any kind of emotions, and taking that away from a person and making them feel as though they're not actually human. And our last one is genocide, which is when you exterminate an entire group of people. All right, so those were just some basic terms that are going to pop up. Here's kind of the background of, if you're not sure about World War II or the Holocaust, this is kind of how it happened in a very small nutshell. So you have to start with World War I. And World War I, massive world war. What was Germany like after that? Well, basically, they ended up being devastated and poor, not in the best situation. And so, what did Hitler have to do with that? How did he rise to power? He was a really great speaker. He made all these great promises. He said, it's kind of funny. His slogan was, "We're going to make Germany great again." And so he, promised all these great things for Germany. And he was very charismatic. And along the time, and these are stereotypes of the Jewish people that weren't just invented after World War I. They kind of were stereotypes since really the beginning of time throughout history. But some stereotypes of Jewish people were that they were penny pinchers, that they were greedy. A lot of the businesses and the economic status in Germany, it wasn't great. And so a lot of the Jewish businesses, however, weren't suffering quite as badly. And so a lot of people kind of pointed their fingers at the Jews and say, well, what are they doing? All of our businesses are going under. Why aren't the Jewish people suffering like we are? And so that created a lot of hostility as well. So how did the Holocaust start? How can one man kill millions of people just, at the snap of his fingers? Well, propaganda is really the main tool used here. Hitler used propaganda to make the people believe that the Jews were inhuman, that they deserved to be annihilated. And it's this crazy concept that you think about, but it actually happened. And so, just years and years of propaganda taught in schools, newspapers, all these scientific publications that were bogus, actually. But that's how people bought into the facts that Jews were less than human. This is an interesting question. Who was aware? Was, the average German citizen aware of what was going on? Did they know about the concentration camp? Obviously, the Nazis. But we're going to actually talk about this question more as we get into our novel Night. Have there been other concentration camps other than the ones in the Holocaust in Germany and the surrounding areas? Of course. America had them, maybe not to such a harsh extreme, but there are concentration camps going on even today, and this is something else we're going to talk about. And our final question, who is Elie Wiesel? He is actually still living. He is the coolest guy ever. He is the author of our short story. He's the author of the book that we're going to read and end on this year. He is a Holocaust survivor. He was a professor. He's written other books, and he is a public speaker. And so we're going to get to know Elie Wiesel pretty well. Here's just an example of some propaganda being used. We see the pretty Germans. Obviously, their blonde hair, the pretty dress, and they're looking... I don't know what it says, it's in German, but they're just presented in this more positive, glowing light. And then we see a depiction of the Jews, and also down at the bottom, the crows, kind of showing they're ugly, they have the big noses, and they just look evil. And so people would see these images all the time and just associate Jews with evil. And here's another one, obviously the big nose, the hands clasped, kind of a greedy, evil smile. Just basically looking like the villain. And so this is, again, another example of propaganda. And obviously we can't have a discussion right here, but as we go through our unit, kind of our overall discussion questions will be, how did this happen? Could it happen again? Is there a group of people that are demonized by the media today or the politicians today? What keeps people from going insane? How did the Jews get through it? How did the Germans get through it? We're going to focus on their mental states. What actually defines a person's morals and ethics? And a lot of other good questions. But for now, I know you don't have your textbooks, but I've scanned it in. And so I want you to go ahead and read the story and get your thoughts down on paper. And I can't wait to see what you come up with.